Today's class is about diaphragm. We are going to discuss its architecture, diaphragmatic opening, and supplied aspect. The diaphragm, which is in fact the thoraco-abdominal diaphragm, it is commonly known as diaphragm. It is a curved musculofibrous sheet lying in the interface between the thorax and the abdomen. Now, this portion has these two surfaces, a superior surface which is the convex one facing the thoracic portion and the inferior concave surface which is the abdominal one. Now this diaphragm, it has this central portion which is flatter and the periphery on the both side they are curvaceous. These are known as cupola or dome of the diaphragm. Dome of the diaphragm. Now the right dome of the diaphragm is higher than left dome of the diaphragm. Now its position also varies depending on the build of the individual. If the individual is short and obese, then it is higher, and if the individual is tall and lean, then it is lower. And also depending on the if the individual is supine or erect. In the supine position, it is in the higher portion, and in the erect posture it is lower. Now it also varies depending on the respiratory phase. Now this right dome of diaphragm, in case of full expiration, it is in the correspond to the fourth rib, and the left dome of the diaphragm, it correspond to the one rib below, which is the fifth rib, and in case of full inspiration they descend two ribs lower. Now viewed from this lateral view as seen in this mid-sagittal section, the profile of the diaphragm is of an inverted J with a short limb which is attached to the xiphoid process situated at the T8 vertebra, and this long limb posteriorly corresponding to the crura, and this is attached to the upper lumbar vertebra. So this is the inverted J shape. Now in this superior view, this diaphragm, it looks like a kidney shaped or bean shaped only because of the presence of this stout lumbar vertebral body in the posterior portion. Now the muscular portion, they arise from this periphery and they converge towards this central fibrous or aponeurotic portion which is known as the central tendon. Now the muscles, they arise at the thoracic outlet circumference and the upper lumbar vertebra. So essentially there are three portions. The fibers, they arise as sternal fiber from the xiphoid process. Then the costal fiber, which arise from the lower 6 costal cartilages and their adjoining ribs. And these fiber, they interlace with the innermost abdominal muscular layer, which is the transversus abdominis, and posteriorly are the lumbar fiber which arise from the medial and lateral arcuate ligament and from the vertebral body by the true crura. Now these fiber, they converge centrally to form this central tendon which is the fibrous portion. Now the fibers from the xiphoid process, they are the shortest one, and those from the ninth rib, they are the longest one. And also the fibers which are arising anteriorly from this sternum and the ribs, they are higher, and those from the posterior portion of the rib and the lumbar vertebra, they are situated inferior to these. Let's discuss this lumbar fiber in detail. Now these lumbar fiber, they arises from these three sources. First, from this paired crura. This is the right crush of the diaphragm, which is the longer and the broader one, and this is the left crus of the diaphragm, more slender one, and its medial continuation, which is the median arcuate ligament. Then just lateral to this is the paired medial arcuate ligament, and more laterally is the paired lateral arcuate ligament. So these lumbar fiber, they lie more inferiorly and posteriorly. Now starting with the paired crura. Now the right crus of the diaphragm, it is broader and longer, and the left one is slender. Now these crura, they arise from the upper lumbar vertebral body and the intervening intervertebral disc. So these right crus, it arises from the upper three lumbar vertebral body and the adjoining intervertebral disc, and the left one from the upper two lumbar vertebral body and adjoining disc. And in the way when they arises, they merge with the anterior longitudinal ligament, and its medial continuation, it forms this arc shaped portion at the level of T12 and L1, and it overlies the continuation of the abdominal aorta. From this very moment, this descending thoracic aorta, it becomes the abdominal aorta. So it lies just anterior to the this passage of the abdominal aorta, this median arcuate ligament. Now the right crus of the diaphragm, this gives a sling like continuation towards the esophageal opening, and these sling like muscular fiber, they contribute into the lower esophageal sphincter tone. Now just lateral to this is the paired medial arcuate ligament. Now this is the aponeurotic arch which overlies the this psoas major muscle and fascia, and medially it is in continuation with the respective crush of the diaphragm, thereby it is connected to the vertebral body, and laterally it is attached to the respective transverse process, anterior surface of the transverse process of first lumbar vertebra. So this is the medial arcuate ligament. Now just lateral to this is the lateral arcuate ligament, which is attached medially to the anterior surface of the transverse process of the L1 on both sides, and laterally to the 12th rib, anterior margin of the lower surface of the 12th rib. And this lateral arcuate ligament, it overrides the this overlying the this quadratus lumborum muscle. So the fibers from these paired crura, its medial arcuate ligament and the lateral arcuate ligament, they give rise to the lumbar set of fibers. So there are three set of arcuate ligament associated with the diaphragm. One is the median arcuate ligament, which is lying just anterior to the aorta or the aortic passes, and it is the medial continuation of both the right and left crura. Then is the medial arcuate ligament, which is lying just anterior to the psoas major, overlying the psoas major, and it is medially connected to the vertebral body, upper vertebral body, through its respective crush, and laterally it is connected to the anterior surface of the transverse process of the L1 on both sides. And third is the lateral arcuate ligament, which is overlying the quadratus lumborum muscle, and it is medially connected to the anterior surface of the transverse process of L1 on both sides. It is laterally connected to the inferior margin of the 12th rib up to its tip. So they are median arcuate ligament in the midline. Just lateral to this is the medial arcuate ligament, and more laterally is the lateral arcuate ligament. Let's again understand this in this diagram. This is the median arcuate ligament. Just posterior to this is the passage of the abdominal aorta. Then this is the medial arcuate ligament, just overlying the psoas major, and this is the lateral arcuate ligament, just overlying the quadratus lumborum. And these are the three aponeurotic arches: lateral, medial, and median. Now these fleshy fiber arising from the periphery, they converge towards the center into this strong but thin aponeurotic portion, which is known as the central tendon of the diaphragm. So this central tendon of the diaphragm, it is placed more ventrally, as we have already discussed. The fibers from the xiphoid process of the sternum, these fibers are the shorter fiber, and gradually as these originate from the ribs and posteriorly from the lumbar vertebra and arcuate ligament, they are becoming longer. So this central tendon, it is placed centrally but lies more ventrally, and this portion, it lies just below the pericardium, into which it is slightly adherent, and this portion is trifoliate. It has these three folia: this central folia, which is more like a equilateral triangle, and these two right and left folia, which are like a tongue shaped, and the left one is narrower than the right one, which is broader. Now in the posterior aspect of this central portion, it has this aperture for the passage of the inferior vena cava, which is the vena cava aperture. Now the superior surface of diaphragm, as seen in this anteroposterior view, it is related to three serous membrane, which is related to three distinguished area. This is the centrally placed area, which is known as the cardiac plateau, and this is the portion which represents the central folia of the central tendon, and this is a flatter portion, and superiorly it blends with the pericardium. And this cardiac plateau, which is flatter, it is lying more on the left than on the right. So it is more towards the left, and this portion is related to the heart and pericardium. Now these bilateral portion in anteroposterior view, we can see they are lying above this central flatter portion. So these are known as the right cupula or dome of the diaphragm and left cupula or dome of the diaphragm. Now this right and left dome of the diaphragm, they are related to the pleural cavity or the pleura. So the pleura lining the base of the lung, they are in relation with this dome of the diaphragm, and the right dome of the diaphragm, it is lying more superiorly and it is broader than that of the left. Now about the relations of the diaphragm superiorly, as we have discussed, this portion it is related to three serous membrane. This central portion related to the pericardium, and these bilateral dome of the diaphragm, they are related to the bilateral pleura, diaphragmatic part of the this parietal pleura of the both side. Now the inferior surface, it is mostly covered by the peritoneum except some part on the right which is directly related to the bare area of the liver. Now inferiorly, the relations on the right side are the right lobe of the liver, and posteriorly is the right kidney and right suprarenal gland, and on the left it is related to the fundus of the stomach, the spleen, the left lobe of the liver, the left kidney, and the left suprarenal gland. Again here the relations of the diaphragm can be seen, especially the inferior relation. This right side is related to this right lobe of the liver, and posteriorly are the this right kidney and right suprarenal gland. On the left side anteriorly, these are the relations. This is the left lobe of the liver, then fundus of the stomach, spleen, then this is the left kidney and left suprarenal gland. Now this diaphragm lying at the thoraco-abdominal interface, it has three large opening or aperture and many small openings, and these are for the passage of various structure either going from the thorax to the abdomen or in the opposite from the abdomen to the thorax. Now this large opening are in sequence. The superiormost opening is the vena cava opening. Now this vena cava opening is towards the right of the midline, and this is situated at the lower border of the T8 vertebra, and this opening is a quadrilateral opening, and it lies between this right folia and the central folia of the central tendon. So it has this aponeurotic fibers which merge with the wall of the inferior vena cava and keeps it patent always. So during the inspiration phase, this aperture inferior vena cava, it remains open, and thus it aids in the venous drainage from the abdomen towards the thorax, that is into the right atrium. Now along with this, the branch of right phrenic nerve also traverses through this vena cava aperture. Now the next opening is the esophageal opening. Now this esophageal opening is an elliptical opening, and this is situated just supero anterior with respect to the aortic hiatus, and this is an oblique slit like opening, and it has this sling originating from the medial part of the right crush of the diaphragm, which transform it into a chimney shaped elongated slit, which is approximately 2.5 centimeter long. So it contributes in the lower esophageal tone of this esophagus. And from this opening, the structure which traverses is obviously the esophagus. Along with that, anterior and posterior vagal trunk, which becomes the this right and left gastric nerve, and esophageal branches of the left gastric vessels. And the third opening, which is the posterior and inferiormost opening, this is the aortic hiatus and lies at the lower border of the T12 vertebra, and it is a osteoaponeuritic opening. So this opening, it is guarded posteriorly by the T12L1 vertebra. On both sides are these crura, right and left crura, and anteriorly is this median arcuate ligament. So it is mounted like this, and since it is osteoponeurotic, so it is always patterned. There is no change in caliber whatsoever because of the contraction of the diaphragm, and the structure which traverses through it are the aorta, which becomes the abdominal aorta as it traverses through it. Before that, it was the descending thoracic aorta, also the thoracic duct and azygous way. And there is a mnemonic related to the number of alphabet that form these. So the vena cava, which is formed by these 8 alphabets, so it is situated at T8. Esophageal aperture, so esophageal is at T10, comprises of 10 alphabets, and for T12 the term is aortic hiatus, so that makes 12 alphabets. Now this is a enlarged view of this diaphragmatic aperture, and here the structure are closely cut to reveal the major aperture of the diaphragm, and this is the posterior and the inferiormost opening, which is the aortic hiatus, and it is bounded anteriorly by this median arcuate ligament and on both sides by the medial edge of both of the crush of the diaphragm, and posteriorly is the thoracic T12 vertebra and L1 vertebra. Now just superior and anterior and towards the left to this is this oblique aperture, which is the esophageal opening, and this esophageal opening, it has this sling of fleshy fiber originating from the medial part of the right crush of the diaphragm, which embraces this esophageal hiatus, and the superficial fiber of this sling, it runs craniocaudally, and the deep fiber, they run concentrically with the esophageal fibers, and thus this portion, this aperture is transformed into a chimney type portion, which is 2.5 centimeter long. Now the superior most aperture is, this is the inferior vena cava, and this is lying in this central fibrous portion and towards the right. Now there are several minor openings in the diaphragm. They are opening for the passage of greater and lesser and least splanchnic nerve in each crush of the diaphragm. Then this sympathetic trunk, it enters by passing deep to the medial arcuate ligament. Then there is opening of hemiazygous vein in the left crush of the diaphragm. And the subcostal nerve and vessels, it passes deep to the this lateral arcuate ligament. Now the left phrenic nerve, it pierces the left dome of the diaphragm through this fleshy fiber, and then it ramifies to supply the diaphragm. Now near this xiphoid process and the costal part, these between these muscle fibers there is an area which is filled by this areolar tissue, and this is known as the foramina of Morgagni. So it is situated between the sternocostal portion of the diaphragm anteriorly, and it is for the passage of superior epigastric branch of the internal thoracic vessels. The diaphragm has got a very rich vascularity. Now the arterial supply, these costal margin, they are supplied by the lower 5 intercostal and subcostal arteries, and the central portion, it is superiorly supplied by the superior phrenic artery, which is the branch of descending thoracic aorta, and along with that the musculophrenic and the pericardiophrenik vessels, they supply this central portion, especially the anterior portion, and these both, they are the branches of internal thoracic artery. Now the inferior portion of the diaphragm, it is supplied by the inferior phrenic artery, which is the branch of this abdominal part of the aorta. Usually that on the right is usually it is a branch of celiac trunk, or often it arises from the abdominal aorta directly, and on the left side it is a direct branch from the abdominal part of the aorta. So it has this very rich arterial supply. And the venous drainage, now the right phrenic vein, it ends in the inferior vena cava, and the left phrenic vein, it is often double, and one ends in the left renal or the suprarenal vein, and the other, it joins the inferior vena cava. Diaphragm is supplied by the right and left phrenic nerves, and these are motor and proprioceptive to the phrenic musculature, and this also provides sensory information from the related peritoneum below and the pleura above. On the peripheral portion of the diaphragm, it is it gets a sensory innervation from the lower 6 intercostal and subcostal nerves. Now these phrenic nerves, they emerge from the cervical plexus, nerve root being C3, 4 and 5, and from the ventral ramus of this cervical plexus, and main contributor is the C4. So from the neck it descends down in the thorax, it lies just anterior to the hilum of each lung, and at the diaphragm they pierces or passes through this diaphragm. On the right side it passes through the vena cava aperture, and on the left side it passes through the muscle fibers, which is lying just anterior to the left folia of the central tendon. So the emergence point of the left phrenic nerve is placed anterior to that of the right phrenic nerve. Now after emergence, these phrenic nerves, they trifurcate. One branch is this anterior branch, also known as the sternal branch, and it proceeds anteriorly and then it connects its fellow from the opposite side. Then second branch, which is lying just relation to the folia on both sides, and this branch then ramifies, and this branch is known as the anterolateral branch. Then the posterior branch, it divides into two branches, a posterolateral branch and a posterior branch. This posterior branch gives supply to the crura of the diaphragm. Now these main trunk and branches, they generally lie embedded in the phrenic musculature or lie just below it, and these also supply the pleura as well as the peritoneum above and below respectively. When these phrenic portion, this diaphragm is irritated or gets involved, as in case of subphrenic abscess or in case of basal pneumonia or pleurisy or the pleural effusion, in that case a referred pain is perceived at the tip of the shoulder, and that explains their origin at the cervical level as well as its common innervation to both the tip of the shoulder as well as the diaphragm. The functions of the diaphragm: it acts as a muscle of the respiration, as its movement downwards causes a negative intrathoracic pressure for inspiration and its recoil back causes the expiration. It also aids in the abdominal straining, as one take a deep inspiration and then holds its breath to cause a increase in the intra-abdominal pressure for micturition, defecation, parturition and vomiting. It also helps in lifting a heavy weight when one holds the breath and lift a heavy weight after taking a deep inspiration. And there is a thoraco-abdominal pump for the drainage of the lymphatic and venous return from the abdominal portion. As the descent of the diaphragm, it decreases the intrathoracic pressure and increases the intra-abdominal pressure, and this compresses the blood in the inferior vena cava and forces it upward into the right atrium of the heart. And one must remember that this inferior vena cava passes through the diaphragm is through this central tendon, which is kept patent as its wall are fused with the aponeurotic margin of this central tendon. Also within the abdominal cavity, the lymph vessels are also compressed because of this descent of the diaphragm and increase in the intra-abdominal pressure, and passes upward within the thoracic duct is aided by this negative intrathoracic pressure. And also the thoracic duct also passes through this aortic hiatus, which is a osteoaponeurotic opening which is always patent. Now the presence of the wall within the thoracic duct, it prevents the backflow of this lymphatics. Now the applied aspect, first is hiccups. Hiccups are due to rhythmic contraction of the diaphragm followed by rapid closing of the vocal cord, making this distinctive sound. Now the uncontrollable hiccups, they are of pathological in nature and generally they are due to the irritation of the phrenic nerve, and these may be due to the irritation of the peritoneum or pleural portion related to the diaphragm. The second is the esophageal reflux. As we know, this lower esophageal sphincter, it is intimately related to this right crush of the diaphragm, medial fibers of whose passes or makes a sling around this esophageal aperture. So when this portion is faulty, as in case of hiatus hernia, there is a chances of reflux of this acidic portion or acidic content in the gastric portion towards the esophagus, and that is known as heartburn or the esophageal reflux. Then is the hiatus hernia. In this case, they are generally two in type. One is known as the sliding hiatus hernia and another is known as the paraesophageal. In case of the sliding, I have shown here this lower part of the esophagus and the related part of the stomach. It slides through this esophageal hiatus towards the thoracic cavity. And in case of the paraesophageal hiatus hernia, this esophageal aperture remains here, esophagus passes through it, but a part of the stomach, it passes through this esophageal aperture and lies side by side through this esophagus with the esophagus. So that leads to the strangulation of this part of the stomach, which herniates through this esophageal aperture, and that is a type of strangulated hernia. So that is a medical emergency. And fourth is the congenital type of hernia. It is usually the Bordeaux hernia or the Morgagni hernia, and they are because of the defect in case of the diaphragm, congenital defect in the formation of the diaphragm, and through this abdominal content